Employment prospects. I had a client who called us last week, and he's probably, again, at the prime of his career. He's in sales, and he's about my age, late 50s. Was laid off, fired, no severance, nothing. And in his exit interview, his CEO, who was brought in, I won't say the company, but the CEO was brought in recently in the last 90 days, made a couple of slips, said, you know, you're not getting any younger. So he called us. And so I've got an employment lawyer working on an age discrimination suit, because there are reasons that people get laid off, and they may not be good reasons. And this guy was generating probably the highest level of sales in his company. So the risk of working for somebody else is a risk, which is why I've always endorsed the entrepreneurial vision. You know, work for yourself, generate your own wealth, your own revenue, if you can. If you can't, you do the best you can. But job loss will force early retirement. Then what do? We try to find another job if we can. We may enter into a whole new industry, and it might be a powerful way of really getting us to do what we want to do. If we're not doing exactly the best job that we've ever worked at, or we don't have passion for the job that we were in and we got laid off on, maybe you'll go out and start a greeting card company or something along those lines. Public policy is also a risk, and in today's environment, it's probably one of the biggest risks we face. What do I mean by that? Tax reductions, but also tax increases. So if we do see tax reform and they do reduce tax rates, we're also going to see tax increases right after it, when the deficit spirals out of control and we have to pay for it. And you can guarantee that. I mean, I've been doing tax law for 37 years, first as an accountant and then as a lawyer. And in every year since I started in 1980, every year there's been some major tax change. You know that too, because you're in the business. And so we see this changing constantly, and we have to deal with it. There also is the possibility that new taxes that we've never seen before may come into play. So if they reduce income taxes, there are things called consumption taxes, or value-added taxes, that are in effect in virtually all countries outside the United States, all across the world, kind of like a national sales tax. So we have local sales taxes, but in countries that are in the EU and in Asia and all across the world, they have value-added taxes, value-added tax systems, consumption-type taxes that may come into play, and they generate enormous amounts of revenue. Of course, I talked about the risk in Social Security. We also have a risk that Medicaid may disappear, which really helps the indigent, but is a very important part of providing benefits to those who can't afford it in our society, and Medicare is at risk. They're also debating whether to increase the contributions from us or any other retirees for Medicare. So right now they do get some premium, right, for supplemental Medicare benefits. Everybody knows that. But that is at risk of being increased. And then of course, healthcare reform, all over the place. With Obamacare, we saw major changes in the law, caused an increase in taxes. In some cases, it caused an increase in healthcare costs. It caused our larger companies to have to do a lot more compliance and run through a lot of hoops, jump through a lot of hoops to make sure that they were in compliance with the law. Now we're talking about rolling it back. And what will that mean for the rest of us, and how we have coverage and the cost of that coverage? Can't predict it. So it's best having a rainy day fund for a rainy day. Healthcare costs and needs are spiraling out of control. Life-extending drugs are becoming more and more expensive. They're being introduced at increasing rates, increasing our life expectancy, increasing our longevity risk. So we're able to live longer because of all the drugs that cost more. And now we have to pay for the privilege of living longer. The question is whether the quality of life is also extended. as your life is being extended. I mean, if you're active and you're able to enjoy your final years, then that works out great. It's just a question of whether or not all of these risks and the additional costs associated with it are manageable. And how do we manage this? I don't have answers for you, by the way. Because if I did, you would know this already. You would know these answers. So, this is a risk. Couples not being able to live together. I mean, I see this a lot, where one of the two spouses is disabled, either suffering from Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, and the other spouse who has been helping take care of that spouse dies or becomes disabled themselves. You know, the risks are enormous in that instance, because who's going to take care of this individual, and how are we going to pay for it? Because more and more of us are relying on our families to take care of our aging relatives. It's just a reality in our society. And there are more and more resources being made available to us, but it costs money to pay for these resources. The quality of caregivers varies depending on where you live and what the situation is. In the major metropolitan areas, we find that the caregivers are much more sophisticated, much better able to deal with complicated situations. But even within the metropolitan area, who you pick to do certain things will vary in terms of quality. And my experience is, in that regard, you get what you pay for. So usually it's going to cost more to get a higher quality caregiver to be able to give you the attention and the quality of care that you need. And then where you reside is a big issue. Yeah, Rick?
Just look, actually, I had to provide for my mother-in-law a person to stay with her in the nursing home for 4 to 5 hours a day, separate from
The nursing home itself.
the care, and I don't care where you are, unless you're nursing homes, they're just understaffed and they've got, it's terrible.
So how many of you have had this experience? A relative in a nursing home, there's nobody in the family able to go out and take care of them. They're in a remote location. The place of residence is a big issue. What do you do about that? And how do you pick the caregiver? Now, there are screening organizations for senior care or for different types of mental care units and so on and so forth, for Alzheimer's and dementia. And the quality, again, of the caregiver really depends on their experience and their training. How do you find these people? And how do you trust them? And what's it going to cost you? When you're talking about caregivers and the steps in retirement and where you live, you usually look at step one is a retirement living facility or retirement housing. And there are a lot of these locations being set up all across the area. In this area, Loudoun County has a couple. There's a new one being built. Where over age 55 are welcome, and they have, provision for medical. They'll have a nurse on site, but you can live in your own house, in your own condo, in your own place. There's also what we call continuing care retirement communities, CCRCs, which are, it starts with independent living, so you may have your own condo or your own apartment that you live in. It'll step up to an assisted living facility or a nursing home facility within that entire facility. And then, of course, there may be an Alzheimer's special care unit for memory loss and memory disabilities.